Today, we have a very special guest, our first ever guest on our new Dimples hair show, Lacie Rodriguez. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is a blast.
So, I had a little chat, we had a little powwow before we got on record here. And as you'll know in the previous video, I did a little introduction of what we're here to do. We're absolutely not here to push or sell product. We're not here to talk about product. If it comes up naturally, great, but that's not the purpose. The purpose here is to talk about what's far beyond the product. What about the feelings, what's going on within us, and more so, the journey. What is Lacie's journey? What was Lacie's journey? Can you tell us, Lacie? Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'd love to hear about your journey.
Sure. So I've grown up in Utah most of my life and always lived in, not always, mostly lived in small towns. So that's really where I feel most comfortable. And I've been married. We're going on I think it's our 14-year anniversary this year. And we have 3 kids, 12, 9, and 4. I do lots of random things on my own, but I mostly do a lot of content creation for social media, and I work within the female hair loss community online. So I'm assuming when you talk about my journey, we're talking about my hair loss journey.
Well,
I don't know.
I'm glad you said that. Originally, the core purpose of Dimples was we're here to help ease the difficult journey of hair loss, right? But then after so many times of looking at that core focus and actually talking to several consumers myself, and starting, you'll see later, I've had my own hair loss journey. I'm still going through it, but it's not about me today. I realized that the journey is far beyond the hair. This is a journey of loss, and that's what we're here to discuss and talk about. This is what we want to know. Like, hair is just a byproduct of really what's going on inside. So, and after talking to lots of consumers, I got to hear so much from them, and I was like, whoa, this is amazing. Like 30 minutes, an hour would go by so fast. Mm-hmm. And we weren't really talking about hair. We were talking about more than hair, like insecurities, hope, a change of life, and all these things that happen. And maybe the hair was a catalyst for that. But I'd love to hear, what you think and your experiences. You could talk about hair or anything to do with that led you up to your journey.
Perfect. So I love what you just said about hair loss could be a catalyst, because that's really exactly where my mind went. I think all people have insecurities. I think all men and women both can feel insecure about their body or their physical appearance. I know from working with so many women, I feel like it's kind of a special beast for us, because I think society has really objectified women a lot and made us feel like the most important thing about us is our physical appearance, whereas men tend to be respected for other things as well. So it's hard for society to kind of switch gears and see that, and it's hard for us women to accept that we are more than just our physical appearance. But I just know throughout my whole life, my physical appearance has been one of the most difficult things I've ever had to deal with, do the inner work about. And had I not experienced kind of this extreme change in my appearance with hair loss, I may still really be struggling with those kinds of insecurities. But I think hair loss for me was kind of a catalyst, like you said, to really face the feelings I had about my own self-image, about how important my physical appearance was, and how that affected how I showed up in my life. And so I started losing my hair when I was 19. So I was really, really young. I was just fresh into college. And it was a really, really stressful time in my life. I still believe that was kind of my trigger for androgenic alopecia, which is genetic hair loss, but it usually has a trigger. And I think that really deep depression and anxiety I was going through at that age is what triggered my hair loss. And it was absolutely devastating. I wasn't only insecure about my hair, I was insecure about my body. I was insecure about a lot of things, but the hair tended to be something I felt so powerless over. And that kind of continued for years and years and years throughout my whole life. I would get a little, have a little bit of regrowth come back, and then I'd have another giant shed, and it never quite recovered. So when I really, and I know that we're not talking about products, but my story always goes to this because it is a huge part of my story. When I discovered hair toppers, okay, so I'll just show you what a hair topper is because I'm wearing one right now, but it's like a little clip-in hair piece that goes on top of my head. So it just covers up where I'm really thin. I have some weight stuff and some powder and things in my hair, but it gives me extra hair and then just covers where I'm really thin.
Awesome. Thank you so much for showing.
Yeah. When I first found a hair topper that worked, it was like I finally can go out in public and not have to worry about what my hair looks like. And that was really empowering for me. And I never saw it as like I'm hiding behind it. And I was just talking to a friend over the weekend that she also wears hair toppers, and we were discussing, like, she first said, you know, you really have to like love yourself and accept yourself first, or you're never going to be happy with a hair topper. And I was like, you know, my experience was kind of the opposite. I feel like I had to find a way where I had some options to where I feel like I had some power back. And that to me was like another kind of epiphany that really led me into like discovering why I was upset about my hair loss in the first place. I don't know what that magical, you know, chronological order, how that happened, but definitely I've been wearing toppers for probably 6 years, and it's been almost that long that I've been really focused on just like healing that inner part of me that struggled so much with my body, my hair loss, my physical appearance in general. I've always loved beauty and makeup and hair, and it's always been a big part of my life. And it was hard for me to reconcile, like, you can still love that, you can still enjoy that, while not relying on it to feel worthy.
Yeah, wow. I mean, I'm just jotting some notes down here. There's so many things like we're limited to talk here, but you know, you really went deep on a lot of things here, and I just want to repeat back some of the things, and maybe we could talk a bit more about them. You said the way you've heard is to love yourself first, and then it will follow. But it was the other way around for you. That is so interesting. Like, because
Yeah.
I've always heard, oh yeah, as long as I'm full inside, I have this like donut in me, and I keep putting things inside of me, buying stuff, eating, drinking, ambition, dating, whatever. It just keeps falling through me. Everything outside of me, I need to
Yeah.
feel whole first somehow on my own through some kind of a journey, which my journey, right? But then, you know, you said there might be a slight solution, not to go into the whole topic of product or anything, but you said it helps you by taking something outside to help with that. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, and it's really hard to verbalize. And I think a lot of women have had the same experience though, because whenever I talk about it, they're always like, oh my gosh, yes. And, you know, hair loss in particular is the most powerless I've ever felt about something about my physical appearance. So I can go into like, I've always been kind of a larger body kind of girl, but deep down I knew that there were ways I could, you know, I had some power in what my body looked like, right? With my hair, I felt totally powerless. Like, I will never forget the doctor being like, it's genetic, it's not coming back, there's no solution out there. And that was the most devastating thing for me, because I just kept being like, all the technology, all the medical advances, you can't grow hair back. He was like, not in your situation, no. And so I was just devastated. And I think when I found hair toppers, it was like suddenly I had some of that power back, where it was really my decision at this point. Like, I had a solution, and it was my decision whether or not I had a full head of hair. I don't know how that worked to really empower me to the point where I am way more confident now, even without hair toppers. I rarely wear hair toppers, to be quite honest, anymore. If I'm going to go out, if I'm going to like get all dolled up and ready, I'll do it because it makes me feel good, but it doesn't make me feel like any better, like I'm any more deserving or I'm any better of a person. And that wasn't always the case. And so it's been, yeah, like kind of this, having some of that power back, finding like something external to kind of boost that whole like introspection, I guess, because that was really, and it's probably never ending, but that is one of the big epiphanies I did have while like I went to lots of therapy. I did hypnotherapy, done a lot of things, but that was kind of my big takeaway was I cannot put my worth as a human being into my, like, I can't give that power to my physical appearance. It's no good. It's constantly changing. There's a lot of it I have no control over. And I'm worth way more than that. I have so much more to offer the world than just like a pretty face or nice hair or a nice body. I have a lot more to me. And when I kind of really accepted that, I kind of accepted just all of me. Like, I'm always on a journey to improve, and I always want to, take care of myself and feel good about myself. But I no longer attach, whether or not I'm worthy of a situation or of a relationship with a person or worthy of love from somebody or worthy of anything I don't attach that to what I look like anymore. And that has been like a huge, huge turnaround.
How did that happen? How did that flip switch to not need, I want to say, I don't know if it's the right word to say, but to not need maybe approval or am I getting
Yeah.
somewhere, or is that,
Yeah.
yeah? How
I
did
think
that
so.
switch so you had it in yourself? When did that happen?
I really thought a lot about this. I think, of course, like therapy and healing some kind of childhood trauma, that kind of stuff has helped immensely. I think becoming a mother helped a lot. Seeing the world like very different now through my children and what I want them to feel and how I would talk to them about the same kind of situation. And I think working professionally with other women, I that's all I do all day is talk to other women who struggle with this same concept and feel, I know a woman who's been married for 20 years and her husband doesn't know she wears a wig because she's too embarrassed to tell him. I mean, these things run deep. And the more women I talk to, it's just like having all these best friends that I'm hyping up and I'm telling them, like you have so much more to offer. Like you're just much more, you're a whole person. You're not just what you look like. And the more I tell that to other women, the more I believe it, I think, for myself, on top
Wow.
of them telling that to me. Like, we have this beautiful online community where I have really, really solid friendships with a lot of these women because we've gone through all this and kind of, I don't ever want to say we came out on the other side because it's always ongoing, but we've come a long way. And so we're really good at encouraging each other. And that is like the most beautiful connection. The most beautiful part of this whole journey is that connection with other women.
So you said it's always ongoing.
Oh yeah.
So
I'm not going to say
is there
I
no
have no
graduation?
insecurities.
Is there no graduation, or this is
God,
it?
I
I've
wish.
made it.
I so wish we could say that. And there are some days when I'm like, I really don't care. I really don't care anymore what I look like. And I truly, genuinely feel that. And then there are some days that I do feel really insecure and I kind of get down on myself or I get mad at myself over, not doing better with my physical appearance or whatever it may be. But I think that you kind of get to this point where those are few and far between.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also able to recognize when I'm doing that, when I'm talking bad to myself. I always stop and think if I would talk to my daughter that way or if I would talk to one of these other women that way. And I really try to just be kinder to myself and remind myself, like, one of my favorite analogies about this, and I don't even know where I heard it, but a $20 bill has the same value, whether it's brand new and crisp out of the ATM or it's old and wrinkled and dirty. Like, it has the exact same value and no store is going to turn it away because it's still worth $20. And I think that if I can just continually to remind myself, I am worthy of everything that I want in this life and my appearance has nothing to do with it.
That's beautiful. I won't look at money the same way now.
Right?
I love that analogy. You mentioned depression and anxiety. Was that around 19 years old or before, or was it after kids? When did it first hit? And when did you first notice? When did it first hit? And when did you become conscious of it?
I think I was in middle school really when it first hit. I first started going to therapy. I remember my dad telling me, "You sleep a lot. I think there's something wrong." And so depression was definitely the first thing I was diagnosed with. I tried lots of medications throughout high school. I never really found one that I loved and that really worked. And then an anxiety, I didn't even realize is what I was experiencing, but I had that like perfectionism gene going on where I never felt like I was good enough. I never felt like what I was doing was enough. And I really got burnt out after high school. I tried to do literally everything I could possibly manage, and it was bananas. Then when I went to college, it was just a lot. It was like this whole new adult life, all of these responsibilities. I mean, I'd worked at a job since I was like 13, but I never had to pay real bills. So it was really overwhelming. I went to a big, prestigious university that I was not ready for. And that's really when I down spiraled into depression and like the anxiety. It was like I just burnt out, I think. And so I started going to therapy then, and I actually got on some medication for a while, and I was on that for years. And I've just kind of been on and off. I had postpartum depression after my daughter, then I had postpartum anxiety after my other daughter. And it was just kind of like this ongoing thing. But I've been like mental health wise, anxiety, depression wise, I've been in a really good place for several years now. And I think a lot of that was just a lot of therapy, the right kind of therapy, the right, support system that I needed at the time, and learning how to manage things on my own. Like I'm learning better what my limits are, and I didn't know what they were before. It was like, I just considered myself limitless and that's not true. And so I'm much better at like taking care of myself and honoring my limits and boundaries, and, healing relationships and learning how to communicate better. I mean, some bazillion things, but they've all kind of worked together to help me get to a really good place that way.
Thank you for your vulnerability. The depression from staying in bed, I can relate. I can totally
Yeah.
relate. And I've had it. I have it sometimes, and I was completely unconscious to it. I didn't know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful that your dad said, "Hey, you sleep a lot." He
Yeah.
pointed it out. He was conscious of,
And that's what he said. He's
yeah.
like, I know when I was really depressed, I slept a lot. And I was like, I mean, yeah, I didn't want to get out of bed. And that episode, I call it my mental breakdown in college, but I really wasn't myself at all. I stopped going to school. I stopped showing up for work. And it was like, I was never like that. I was always so dependable. And partly because I had anxiety so bad, I hated to let people down. So it was like so out of character for me to just stop showing up, stop paying my bills. I remember my mom was like, you didn't pay your car payment and now they're coming after me. And I'd like shut down. It was terrible. It's a terrible way to feel. And it's terrible when you don't have a support system that can like really help you and understand and recognize what's going on. I mean, I love my mother to death, but her phrase of "you just have to snap out of this" was like infuriating, really truly drove me deeper.
So you have to snap. I'm familiar with that one.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like,
Suck it up.
you're an adult now. You got to suck it
Yeah.
up, and you got to do what you need to do. And I'm like, I used to tell her, I feel like I am in the middle of a lake and I know how to swim, but for whatever reason, I physically can't move my legs. I was like, that's what it feels like to me. Like I'm drowning with the knowledge of like, there's no reason I should be drowning. Like I know how to do this. I've done it before, but I physically can't. And it was really hard for her to understand for a long time. But education is everything. Knowledge is power. And the more we talk about these things and normalize them, because not that they're normal, but they're so common. And, having that compassion for other people can really help them help themselves,
So the suck it up, hurry up and get over it, extends to stop crying, there's nothing wrong,
Right.
translates to me to just don't feel.
Right.
Don't feel. Push it inside, repress it. There's two things, repression and suppression. There's this great book, I'll put it in the show notes somewhere, David Hawkins. It's called Letting Go. And he talks about these two things, and he says that there is an unconscious pushing down or pushing inside, and then there's a conscious one too. So yeah,
Yeah.
for me, I was unable to experience anger or sadness. Those were not acceptable feelings. Joy and happiness, and that was it.
Yeah.
So, have you had any? Were there any feelings that you held in that didn't feel safe to share? That one kept you in bed. What was your
Yeah.
experience with that?
So this is digging deeper. I hope you're okay with this. I'm okay with this, but
Yeah, this is what we're here for.
you're going to know all my secrets, James. No, they're not secrets. I'm really open about this, but I grew up in a really abusive home. So I highlighted my dad recognizing I was depressed, but in reality, he was kind of a monster. Not kind of, he was a monster
Mm.
for most of the time. And growing up, I witnessed a lot of abuse and experienced it. It was
Mm.
really, really rough. My mom and him were on and off again, like my whole childhood. And I think emotions, as far as I was always afraid of making it harder on my mom. So it was like, she would never have told me, like, you can't cry, or she didn't say those things, but her limited emotional capacity, it was like she was on the verge of a breakdown all the time. She was barely surviving. And as a child, I could totally feel that. And intuitively, I knew like I could not be a burden for her. She was at her limit. I could not make it worse. And so I was really protective of my mom. Sorry, I get emotional, so we're gonna.
Don't be sorry. Don't be sorry. This is.
But I really think that had a lot to do with, yeah, pushing everything down, because it was like, I don't want to make her life harder. I don't want to make her worry about me. At the same time, I never felt like my feelings were ever respected by my dad in any way. So it was always about him. It was never about how I was feeling or how anyone else was feeling. So I think my siblings and I, like, we all kind of learned to just, yeah, suck it up, push it down, and we're not going to make it harder on anyone else. And we're going to protect mom at all costs. So there was really no boundaries there. And we were taking on these adult responsibilities as little kids, And that's been a lot of the childhood trauma I've had to work through. Is I was afraid of anger, because
Mm.
I saw how angry my dad got, and it's scary. It took me a long time to accept the fact anger is normal, and it doesn't have to be
Yes.
explosive and violent and scary. Anger's
Yes.
normal. And sadness is normal, and it doesn't have to mean like the kind of sadness my mom experienced all the time. It didn't have to be that scary either. Those two emotions in particular were very scary. But yeah, I think learning about these things and learning how to recognize like why I am reacting this way, or why I'm feeling this way, and what triggered it, and how do I become so self-aware that I can see that as it's happening, or before it happens, before I'm like in the depths of depression and anxiety and not able to come out. I've gotten really good at recognizing when I'm starting to spiral. And when I'm starting to spiral, I know it's like I have to notify. I got to tell my husband. He has to know, like, I need a break. And I do this. I take regular breaks, James, and they're like solo trips. And I think it was hard for my husband to understand for a while, but when I get really overwhelmed with life, with, relationships, with work, with whatever, that's when it's a breeding ground for anxiety. And then that leads to depression. So when I start to feel that hitting me, I have to take a break. I have to be by myself. I go away for a day and a night. And when I come back, I'm like recharged. I've dug myself out and I'm good to go. But I've had to learn all these things about myself. And for so long, it was like, I can't do that. And I can't let people down. And I have to do this. I have to push through, and I have to just keep going and keep going and keep going. And I was just digging myself a hole.
So what you described to me, what I heard was you have become conscious, so conscious that you're able to pause before going in a downward spiral, as you said, and then you're able to ask for help.
Yeah.
And then the really advanced thing, which I find very difficult, you were able to ask for what you want. Hey,
Right.
husband, I need to go on a trip. I got to get out. I've got to go. You ask for what you want. And then you went and got into action and went on that day or night and a half trip. And whatever you do on that trip filled you with love. And you came home full. I bet you had loads of love to give to your family when you got home too.
Yeah, exactly. And I can tell when I'm depleted. And when I'm
Mm.
depleted, that's a bad sign. I know how much my sleep affects my anxiety. It's like my pattern is my anxiety starts to creep up, and when it gets too high, I get burnt out and I get depressed. So
Mm.
I've learned how this kind of is how I work and how I function. And my anxiety gets worse and worse as I'm sleep deprived, or I am overworking myself, I'm not taking enough breaks, or I just have too much on my plate in general. And when I feel that creeping up, it's like I really have to reevaluate. I know sleep is huge, so I'm really protective over my sleep. I rarely do things that will take away from my sleep, because I know it's never worth it. And those trips are like almost like clockwork. And the first time it wasn't as easy. When you say like asking for what you want, that's a really scary thing. I think when, especially for me, where I was so afraid to ask for what I wanted growing up ever, you know, it was like, don't put that kind of pressure on my mom. So for my husband in the very beginning, like the first time I took a day off, my babies were little and I was overwhelmed. And I literally woke up on a Saturday morning at like 6 o'clock and told him, I woke him up. I said, I'm taking a day off from life. Like, I don't know what you're just going to have to cover it. And he was like totally taken by surprise. And this was not the best way to jump into this, but I just did. I left for the whole day. I didn't even tell him where I was going. I didn't want him to call me. I just wanted to be alone. And so that has evolved into a much healthier, like, hey, I feel like I need a solo trip. And at this point, he's totally fine. It took a while though. For a while, he was like, what are you doing on this solo trip? Like, he was a little suspicious, but he trusts me. We're good. He understands me too, how I work. And I've had to really explain it to him. And I think he gets it at this point. But that's really, really hard to ask for what you want, especially when you don't feel like it's a need. It's not even like a normal thing, I think, that people do. It's just something I felt like I needed. And anyway, it's been a journey to get to that point, though.
So being able to ask for what you want, and then before that, because I find that as an advanced thing, because I I know what you want. I know what all of you want. I can list everything that you want here. I can hand it to you on a silver platter as a closet people pleaser right here.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but I don't know what I want, you know, and had that journey of pausing, and what do I really want, and then being able to ask for it, you know, without
Right.
any, but being able to ask for it without any expectation, because it could be a no, straight up no.
Yeah.
You know, so and then before that, I'm not sure if you relate. I want to kind of sideways ask you through my experience. I first of all found it very difficult to say no, and
Yeah.
then, you know, I would say, you know, a friend, you know, just a little example I gave it in another thing, talk I had, it was like a friend would borrow a sweater, and I didn't want to lend the sweater to the guy because I knew I wouldn't get it back, but I couldn't say no. I just had this like bad feeling in me,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd be like, yeah, but all right, fine. And then I would resent myself later for saying yes when it really meant no.
Mm-hmm.
So it was such a dishonest thing with myself. I would say yes when I meant no.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you relate with that, if that's anywhere in
Totally.
that wheelhouse.
Yeah, that people pleaser thing runs real deep too. Like, I joke now, my mom used to tell me, like, you're such a doormat. Like, you just let people walk all over you. And, you know, and I would always justify it. Well, it's just because I just don't care that much, you know? When inside, I'm like, no, I care. I just don't want them to know I care. I was the kind of person where if a restaurant brought me the wrong order, or if my food was bad, or my steak was cooked wrong, it was like, I'm never going to say a word. And people would like make fun of me, you know? And I would like be forcing myself to eat it so nobody would know that I didn't want it. It's just crazy. Like, I think a few things I've learned in therapy is, number one, my needs are just as important as anyone else's. And that was really hard to like really believe. I still sometimes find myself justifying other people's needs ahead of my own, even though I know that like this is a big need for me. The other thing that I learned was that there's always a respectful way to say how you feel. And I think that's been huge, because that's just helped my communication in general. I think, you know, I was always afraid of hurting someone's feelings if I ever had to like, you know, have conflict. If there was ever any kind of conflict resolution, my number one priority was don't hurt their feelings. And most of the time that meant I never said what I needed to say, and I never stuck up for myself. And so I would end up agreeing to things I didn't really agree with. And I've learned, and like this has been huge in my marriage in particular, is we just talk a lot more openly about how we feel about things. It's just using those I statements. Like, instead of being like, you did that, you made me feel like crap, it's just like, I feel like in that moment you didn't care about me, or whatever it is. But I have to continually tell myself there's a respectful way to say how you feel. I think the respect thing is funny, because my dad used to always use that against us. Like, you're not showing respect for me. Anytime we had anything to say that went against whatever he said, even if even small trivial things. It was like, no, I'm your dad, you respect me. And to him, any kind of like, discussion, if we weren't in agreement with him, was a lack of respect.
Mm.
I've had to really reprogram my brain. That's not true. I can completely respect a person and still disagree with them and still tell them that what they did hurt. And that's still being respectful. So there's a lot of rewiring and reprogramming around specific situations and specific feelings and terms. And yeah, it's a lot. Therapy is a lot. But
So
it's
you
really
jumped into a
awesome.
lot of solutions. I really appreciate that, and
Yeah.
you gave us some concrete examples of the past as well. And I want to ask you today: how do you handle conflict? Does it frighten you? Is it how do you handle it, and how does it make you feel as opposed to from the past?
Yeah. In the past, I avoided it at all costs. I mean, it would take a lot for me to face any kind of conflict. And it was normally after I have, you know, pushed it down so long to the point then I explode. And that happens. It still happens sometimes, but it's never quite as bad because I really try to pay attention. Like when people say, like, don't sweat the small stuff and like, pick your battles, those kinds of things. I used to take to the point where like I would pick no battles and I would sweat nothing because I didn't want to fight about anything. And now I have to really think like, is this really something small or is it really affecting me? And I just think it should be small. And I I really have to try to face those things early on. I'm also really big about proactively avoiding conflict.
Mm.
So, like setting boundaries before there's even a chance for conflict, that's worked really well for me. And any kind of relationship or a situation where I try really hard to think about like, where could this go wrong? Like, where are all these outlets where this could go wrong? And let's try to plug them now so that there's no chance of us fighting about this later. So that's worked really well too. But I still hate conflict. Like I'm never gonna like conflict. It makes me super uncomfortable. Still breaks my heart when I feel like I'm hurting somebody just for standing up for myself. Like it's still super hard, but I'm not as afraid of it as I used to be.
Well, you're definitely getting your power back when you're using your voice, I'm sure. And conflicts, yeah, some people love it. Some people embellish. They feel in the chaos and the whirlwind of conflict, it feels comfortable, and in the quiet and the silence, it's not.
Right.
I like quiet and silence. I like to probably a little too much. Maybe I isolate a little too much. which is probably a defect, where I go too far to one side. But yeah, avoiding conflicts, getting your power back. I heard Powerless before. You were talking about hair loss with Powerless, healing the inner part of me. These things run deep, and how sleep is so important for you. And then anger. You said something about anger. There was something. Well, yeah. In addition to conflict, anger, conflict. How are you today? And you said there's healthy anger, which is something I've learned recently as well, because I was taught anger is bad, anger is bad, don't ever get angry, don't ever get angry. So it was always like, we were the fine family. Like, how's everything going? Great.
Fine.
How was your day? Great. I just got bullied at school, but I was going to stay inside. No one's going to know about that because we just don't talk about that stuff. Like everything's great, that was as
Yeah.
deep as a conversation as we would have. Have you? I know conflict is uncomfortable and can be, and you've got more comfort with it, but have you found a healthy way to be angry? Do you ever get angry? Like, tell us about anger.
Oh yeah. And I got angry before. I
Hmm.
just pushed it down.
Okay.
I I'm a pretty passionate person. And I think anytime I just have this, I'm just a very, you know, I feel things really deeply. And so anger is one of them. And I get really angry. And in the past, I was so afraid of anger. I was afraid of doing something I would regret or saying something I would regret. The only really example I had of anger was my dad, who was completely volatile and violent. So anger to me was very scary. And I was afraid. I remember when I was first with my husband, I was like, he just seems too chill. Like, I'm afraid to see him angry. I was terrified. And we were married before I ever saw him get really mad. And it wasn't even at me. And I just remember sitting there being like, how's he going to react? Like, how's he going to react? I was terrified of anger, of my own, of anyone else's. which I think brings into that people pleasing, like, I don't want to make anybody mad. I'm going to do whatever it takes to not make anybody mad because anger was so scary. And again, through just like realizing all emotions can be good. Like there's a reason we have emotions, and anger is a really good indicator something's wrong. Like, and when you just push that aside and push it aside, it's like having symptoms of cancer that you're just like, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And then someday it's going to all come out and you're going to be poisoned, And so I started trying to just face that anger, be like, okay, so I'm feeling something really deeply. And like, what is it? What is it really that made me mad? Because usually it's not something that seems stupid. It's something deeper than that. So trying to find the root of the anger, like it's not the fact that he left his socks on the floor that's making me angry. What's making me angry is that I've asked him 100 times and clearly I'm not important enough to him to listen, right? Like that's just a stupid example, but something like that. It's like I really had to get to the core of why I was angry because I was too good at being like, quit being mad about the socks on the floor, Lacie, and then justifying that and then, brushing that under the rug and never actually addressing the root core of why I was actually angry. So I think I've worked through this where like I won't fight when I'm really angry. It's not a good time for me to address the conflict. So I have to kind of take a break and I will stew. Like sometimes it gets worse before it gets better. So I'll take a break and sometimes I'll get even more mad while I'm on my break. But I finally usually will regulate myself and be ready to talk about it. And that's when I said like using those like I statements to be respectful, but still say like why I felt that. And I mean, that's not just in my marriage, that's in all of my relationships and even work relationships. There's all kinds of situations where anger is appropriate. It's just trying to manage like, how I'm going to use this emotion to figure out what's actually wrong and work on that.
The book I mentioned earlier by David Hawkins, Letting Go, he's not here anymore, this guy, but he had this consciousness scale where at the top was like peace, serenity, joy, and then at the bottom, I don't remember exactly what the lowest thing on there was, but you had depression, which was pretty close to the bottom, and then anger was actually above depression. So anger was and I was like, what? Anger is a higher level, in his opinion, a higher
Yeah.
level of consciousness than depression. And he described that it's about you actually expressing and you're not closing down. And when I feel depression, I close down, and the simplest tasks become so difficult to do. Like, oh my
Yeah.
God, it's like everything is so like reading an email or replying to an email. There's the smallest little picking my socks up off the floor. My wife's gonna love
Right.
that because that's me as well. And many other things I leave around the house. I mean, it's insane, but yeah, anger. As long as I'm not hurting the other person with my
Right.
anger, it's just pushing it inside is you know too detrimental over time. Definitely,
Right.
it's like pushing a spring down. Just keep. How long can I hold this
Exactly.
spring down? And you mentioned doormat as well. I love that. I love that phrase. I've heard that before, and I've even heard the term exploding doormat,
That
where
was me.
oh, okay, yeah. So it's like I'm the doormat, and someone's stepping. Okay, right, you're stepping all over me. Take my shirt, fine. Oh yeah, yeah. Take that. Sure, sure, sure. And then eventually,
And then
I
it's
build
like,
up enough resentments. Boom.
yes,
Step on that area.
yes.
Nope. So
Yeah, my kids are really familiar with that. Unfortunately, they're on the receiving end of that part of me. I'm working on that, but it's like I love them, I want to do what they need and I want to provide for whatever it is they need and I put up with a lot of things and I'll try to be nice and I'll say something 500 times and then it's like and then I'll yell and then they're like, "Geez, why are you so mad?" And I'm like, "Because I've been hiding that I'm mad for the last hour." You know what I mean? So yeah, that explosive doormat, that's the problem is like I'm and I don't know if everybody's like that or if it's just my like, I told you I have this kind of like passionate personality. I can't keep that stuff down forever. It's going to come out eventually. So if I just kind of let it come out slowly, one thing at a time instead of it storing up, it's less volatile.
exactly. Wow. So you've mentioned a lot of things. You mentioned therapy, all different kinds of things. Was there any therapy or works that you did that really stood out in your journey from when you started? You said, was it middle school or till
Mm.
for you've been on this journey. You said it never ends, the journey, right?
Right. Right.
Which is so true. We could talk about that. There's no graduation. That's as some
No.
say, the spiritual journey. It's all about growth. We keep growing. So, is there anything that sticks out, like this one thing or this thing really clicked?
Yeah, I think, I told you I've been on and off medication kind of
Mm-hmm.
most of my life. And I have nothing against medication. I think medication has kind of like stopped the bleeding for me in like really, really difficult times in my life. Kind of was the catalyst to like get out of the deep hole I was in. But it tended to make me feel like apathetic. So I lost the joy in life too. It was like in order to like buffer the hard
Mm-hmm.
things, then I also didn't really enjoy the good things. And it was a very like weird, I don't know, it was a very weird way for me to feel. And I haven't been on medication in a long time. And I think that I finally tried EMDR therapy. I don't know if have you ever heard of that?
I have done it.
You've done it.
I've
Oh my
done
gosh.
it.
I could talk about EMDR all day long,
Yes.
but that was a total turning point for me
Mm.
because I had never, it was still very new. To me anyway, I'd never heard of it. And when I talked to a therapist who did it, sounded really like I didn't think it was going to really work. I just was like, she's like, you're going to hold these paddles and they're going to vibrate back and forth left and right. And I was like, I was very skeptical. But I have never had a reaction to therapy like I did with EMDR. And I mean, honestly, the way I've heard later that like not everybody does it this way, but it was very intense. Even like the first time was super intense for me and it kind of scared me, but I stuck with it. And after, a few sessions, I released so much of just so many, just, I don't even know how to explain it. So much fear and resentment that I had, like I didn't feel it anymore. Not that it never creeps up. It's not that it
Mm-hmm.
never creeps up. It didn't completely disappear from my life, but it got to this point where it was totally manageable. And I can like see things, my dad was a lot of that. I was terrified of my dad. I told you he was like a monster. And I was still, as a grown adult who didn't have any contact with him, terrified of him. And I left EMDR therapy like no longer afraid of him. Like I could have walked up to him in the street and not felt this like gut wrenching fear like I always had. And that was a huge turning point for me. I think those are those things that like I didn't
Mm-hmm.
even know that was even still affecting me,
Yeah.
but it was, and it was eating me up inside and it was stopping me from doing a lot of things in life I wanted to do because I had this fear and this resentment and things that were eating me alive. And that really changed the game for me. So that was the biggest turning point.
So the fear and resentment, has the resentment gone, or is there still any bit there, or is it completely removed?
I'm sure there's still some resentment. My dad actually passed away a few years ago. It was a
Mm.
few years after I did that therapy. So it was kind of like right in the middle between then and now. But, I still never had contact with him after that. I didn't feel the need to. I wasn't afraid to, but I just didn't. I kind of knew that was a boundary I wanted to keep. And I don't know. I think, especially since he's passed away, the resentment has really like, it's next to nothing anymore. I think I have a lot more compassion for him. Not that I justify anything he did or anything like that, but not being afraid of him has helped get rid of a lot of that resentment. So
Wow.
it is what it is. And I'm not the only person who had that kind of an experience. And, unfortunately it's really common. And I think people do the best they know how to do. And sometimes that's terrible, but it's all you can really expect of people.
I just want to commend you for the hard work you have done to pass through that, and to be conscious enough to go and go into it. A lot of people just want to watch Netflix and have some ice cream at night and just continue and repeat and repeat. The journey of self growth, it's there's a lot of pain involved, but then without the expectation of it, but the reward can be huge. It can manifest in so many areas of my
Yeah.
life, as I'm sure when that was removed from you and you had that aha moment, probably in other relationships and other areas of life, other people just suddenly start talking to you differently or treating you, maybe you felt different, you gave
Yeah.
you a profound shift. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yes. And I kind of always knew, like, I don't know. I think I've always had a little bit of that kind of perspective of like, I knew there was things that I experienced that I needed to like work through. I've always been a huge proponent for therapy. Some people are really resistant to it. I was like, give me all the therapy. I want to know how to like get better and I want to improve. I've always had that kind of a personality. I like to work on things. I know that things can get better. But I think you're right. It's hard to like, it's a sacrifice in a lot of ways because it is really hard work. And I don't think people understand how hard it is until they really are in the thick of it. And it's like sometimes you're like, I don't even think this is worth it. I don't think it's working. I just want to like go back to being numb to it all and
Mm.
forget about it. But you just have to know that like it is really successful if you stick with it, and it can totally change how you feel, how you show up in your life, the things you end up doing, the paths you take, the people you allow in your life, the relationships you have. There's so much that it improves. Your physical health can improve. It's just like it touches everything about you in your life.
When you went to do EMDR, which I definitely want you to just describe a little bit more so our listeners can know what this strange
Sure.
thing is, it sounded like you were ready. And I've done lots of these things. I'll share another day, one day, about my things I've done. And I've seen people in the room. I went to group things. I've done lots of things that, or I'll just put it in terms of me. I've gone and done things and I was kind of pushed to doing it, or I wasn't fully ready, and then
Right.
there were times where I was in complete surrender and, I was at the rock bottom. Can you relate to that? Is there something in there? Have you experienced either of the two? Doing this
Yeah.
without wanting to do it, and then doing it really ready to do it?
I don't know if I've ever really been pushed to do therapy. I know lots of
Mm.
people who have, and like, yeah, it's not successful unless you're there because you want to be. It's just, it sounds cliche, but truly, like, nobody can really help you but you. Like, you
Mm.
can't change yourself if you're not willing or want to. And therapists aren't there to change anybody. I still think people don't quite understand that. Like, therapists don't change you. Therapists help you work on yourself. And it's a wonderful, they're trained to know how to help you find these coping mechanisms and reprocess. You wanted to kind of go into EMDR therapy. Like, I mean, I don't know a ton about it, but what I do know is it was developed for soldiers with PTSD. And it's a way of reprocessing traumatic experiences. And my therapist explained it that, and this like has helped me immensely also. This is another one of those, like, I should write these quotes on walls because it's totally changed the way I see things. One of my biggest fears in life was my kids being traumatized. I was like, I avoided certain things with them. I didn't want them to witness things. I was so afraid that they were going to see like some big fight between me and my dad, and it was going to traumatize them because that traumatized me as a child. Anytime we saw people fighting, or we had a family fight where, my brother and sister got into this big screaming match one day, and I was like, I got to get my kids out of here. I was just terrified that they were going to somehow be traumatized by this. And my therapist said, it's not the events themselves that traumatize, it's the lack of repair afterwards. And she told me, had you had the same experiences, but then you had an emotionally available adult in your life that could help you, sit you down and help you feel safe and help you process and talk about what happened, and, come to this kind of full circle moment of where you sort of like understand why, but now you're not afraid because if you had that, she's like, you wouldn't be here. You would be a healthy adult, because that traumatic things can happen, but there's always, you can be there for your children to help them process it. So that changed everything. So this EMDR therapy is like, you just reprocess. It's like reparenting yourself. I can't remember if you said that today or in a video I watched of you, but reparenting yourself, which is exactly what I did. I went into this trance. I don't know if everyone has the same experience, but I was definitely in a trance. It has to do with the way your brain processes things left to right, and these vibrating paddles I had in my hands that were alternating left and right. And she kind of walked me through some of these really traumatic memories. And then I kind of put myself back in there as an adult to talk to little me and work through, processing that traumatic experience. And yeah, it's pretty bizarre, but it really can rewire your brain. And I
Mm.
felt that viscerally.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow. So they gave you so you connected with the paddles. Firstly, I
Mhm.
love your description, how you said EMDR was created for army veterans, and I love that. I totally forgot about that. You're absolutely right, for
Yeah.
PTSD. Wow. The one that I related to was the headphones. I
Oh.
like, for fun, I like music. The traditional one is the flashing light, and I looked at that and I was like,
Mhm.
oh, I don't like this. I'm going dizzy. And then she put the headphones on. It was just like this TikToking thing, panning from side to side, and that was what I
Uh-huh.
connected with. So yeah,
Oh, that's
I had
cool. I have heard of like different mediums, different ways to do it, but it is always like this left to right
yeah, and
movement for
everyone
sure.
has their thing that they connect with. And I
Right.
earlier on in our show, for those who are listening to the podcast, I pumped my fist into the air and went, yeah, when you said, when I go to restaurants and I don't like what I'm eating, I continue eating what I'm eating, and everyone thinks it's crazy. Lacie, you just spoke to the choir. I think on one of my things I've got, my personal social things, like WhatsApp, where you can have a title for yourself or like a little one liner. I
Mhm.
think mine is, or it was, if you went to a restaurant, you didn't like what you ate, what would you do? I'm dead serious. And I'm the guy when I'm at a wedding, like I used to be, long story, but I was very, very, very shy most of my life. Now it got removed. They used to call me mute in high school, believe it or not.
Oh.
But it's been removed from all this, similar stuff that you've done. And I'm the guy when I go sit at that wedding table and I like ask a question to everyone, and my wife's kicking me under the table, so embarrassed. I've even done it in front of a whole room. And the question is, if you're in a restaurant, would you return your food if there was something wrong with it or you didn't like it? And it's so funny because it's so divided. There are people that are real quick. Yeah, right away, I would send that back.
Absolutely.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh God, I love that. Good for you, mate. Good for you. And then there are others that like kind of look around and no, I just eat it. And I did send. I actually sent one back for my wife the other day.
Did you?
Yeah. Oh my
That's so
God.
much growth.
It was, she got something. What was wrong with it? It was in a nice restaurant. Oh, there was a hair in it. There was a hair
Mm.
in it. And it
Yep.
and it always happens
I
to her.
was the
It always
person who would
happens to her.
either,
Yeah.
yeah, I was the person who would either continue to eat it and just try to talk myself out of it being disgusting, or just quietly stop eating and never say anything.
Yeah.
So I'm so
Yeah.
glad you got there.
Yeah, I called the guy and I said it kindly to him. I'm like, hey, there's a hair in this. Can
Yeah.
we change it out for another one? He's like, yeah, sure.
Right.
And my wife was like, no, 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 don't do it. Don't do it. Please don't do it. I was like, I'm doing it. Nope, made a decision. I'm doing it. We got to do it. And I did it one time in
Right.
another restaurant. The potatoes were like burnt, and
Mhm.
and I love it. I think it's also an English thing. I think like I'm culturally a people pleaser as well, from
Right.
generations of people pleasers. Like, I'm all sorts of ethnicities too. I've got like generate hundreds of years of people pleasing in me that I've had to break out. So I love
Yeah.
you just made my day even more by the restaurant analogy.
I will tell you, I've come a long ways too. Like if I genuinely think that there's something wrong with my meal, I have to take a deep breath and kind of pep talk myself, but I'll tell them now. And like you said, I think I've always associated that with like some jerk in a restaurant who's going to be a jerk about it and yell and make a scene.
Yeah.
You can do it kindly. You can do it
Hmm.
respectfully. It's still standing up for your needs and your, expectations, and it's okay. I'm so glad that you did that.
Thank you, thank you. And I actually even, I mean, I took this thing as such a deep project. Like I was so curious. I know several restaurant owners, and I've asked every one of them, like, hey, like, what's the deal with people returning food? Like, are you okay with it? You're not. And then one guy's like, if they've eaten more than half of it, no. If they've just had a little bite, yeah, sure, I'll return it. No
Yeah.
problem. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's just me. It's like
Right.
but the
Yeah.
fear behind it is, oh no, they're not going to like me. This person
Right.
serving me in the restaurant is not going to think, and it goes back to one of the things that was touched upon when I did EMDR that kept coming up. Kept having this recurring thought, is that I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. And how can I,
Yeah.
that was me. Anyway, this is your show right now, but I'm getting carried away here. But the restaurant thing, oh my God, I'm definitely going to tell my wife. She's going to have to watch this. That definitely, for sure. So you said something about forgiveness as well. Maybe you didn't say, you said something about resentment and not having
Yeah.
resentment. I heard this meme, or meme, however you pronounce it, the other day. I
Mhm.
saw it, and something went like this. It was about forgiving, but not necessarily needing that person back in my life. And it said, forgiveness, but access denied.
I love that. That's
You know,
exactly.
it's like
Yes.
boundaries. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
That boundaries it is still a really hard lesson. But I have to tell you, at my dad's funeral, so again, I hadn't spoken to my dad in 3 years when he passed away. But when we had a small service for him. Of course, I'm his daughter, and there's three of us. So between the three of us, we planned the funeral. And my uncle, who was a lot like my dad, his brother, came up to me at the funeral and said, "I bet you regret, not having contact with your dad over a
Mm.
what's that called? Oh shoot, I'm thinking in Spanish. That's so stupid.
Tell us in
What's
Spanish.
it called when over a grudge?" That's what he
Oh,
said.
okay.
I bet you're regretting not talking to your dad over a stupid grudge. That's what he said. And I was like, there's a big difference between a grudge and boundaries. And
Wow.
he had nothing to say after that, but I really that was exactly how I felt. And I had talked to myself through that a lot. Like, am I not talking to him because I'm mad at him? I'm like, no, I'm not talking to him because it's not healthy for him to be in my life. Not for me, not for my kids, not for my husband, and not for him. Like, we are better individuals not having contact with each other. Sorry, I have my mascaras running a little. Anyway, but I had to continually tell myself that, because
Mm.
it's easy to kind of jump back into that, but how is he going to feel? And am I being a bad daughter? Am I being a bad person? And it's like, no, I know what my needs are. And it really took my husband. My husband has been a huge support in all of my journey, but it really took him being like, no, I'm not okay. I'm not okay with him in my life. I'm not okay with him in your life. And you need to recognize that. You need to recognize the damage it's causing. It's not just about you anymore. It's about our kids. It's about us. And he's not a safe person, So yeah, it's really easy to talk ourselves out of that when we've grown up a people pleaser.
Wow. I mean, look at all the power that's exuding from you right now. The word, I said it before, powerless, powerless. I'm powerless to hair loss, to hair, the hair journey, and like there is so
Yeah.
much power exuding from you from all this, and you're setting boundaries, you're saying no, access denied, this is awesome.
Yeah.
So for the bringing it back to women, you help lots of women. God, I speak to lots of ladies that come from you thank you so much, by the way. And every one of them, they're like, oh my God, Lacie Rodriguez. It's like they're almost out of breath when they're saying your name. Like, what do you do to these women? Like, if you ask them to walk on fire, I think they would, but I'm sure there'd be a good, lesson or reason behind it if you said that. But these ladies are like, they love you. You have a community, and what you're doing is great. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. I really stumbled into this. This wasn't something that I planned my life out and was like, this is the career I want. But I told you, I feel things really deeply. I make friends really easily. I genuinely love people until they give me a reason to not. And when I started I started selling makeup, to be honest, which is why I started being on social media. Is I love makeup. I love beauty. I was like, I'm going to try this. This will be fun for me, something for myself, right? Because my kids were
Mm-hmm.
little and I was losing my identity. So I'm like, what do I like to do? I love makeup. So I started doing makeup tutorials and selling makeup through those. And around that same time is when I discovered hair toppers. And I was kind of like, should I share about this? There's probably very few people. In my mind, it was like, this is very niche. This is going to be very few people that even connect with this. But, it's made such a big difference in my life. I want to share it. And so I started talking about my hair toppers, and then I started getting messages from women like, oh my gosh, where did you get that? And I want to know everything about it. And it just kind of snowballed, and I started trying all different kinds of toppers. And so people would come to me. I also have a degree in teaching, by the way. So that's another thing. I've never used it. It's elementary ed degree, but I honestly pray I never need to use it. I think I much prefer working with adult women than little kids at this point. But I love teaching too. So I was doing a lot of that and talking to women and the little bit of knowledge I had. But again, it just kind of snowballed and it grew. And I started doing virtual consults for women to help them find the right kind of topper. And that has really been, I think, the magic, because, you you can watch somebody online and you can watch them like put on a topper or do some makeup or whatever, and it can be really inspiring. And I felt that on the other end. There are people I followed online that are super inspiring to me, and I've never even talked to them. But getting on those virtual chats with people like face to face has really been incredible. And I don't even know how many I've done at this point, but I know there's hundreds and hundreds. And it's really a really personal connection. And I'm so grateful I get to do that, because I think most like influencers or like people on social media don't normally have that kind of a connection with people. They can, chat through their DMs or, answer comments and things like that. But that like one-on-one virtual chat isn't very common. So I feel really grateful that I've been able to experience that. And I don't know, I think other women find that a really special connection too.
Are there any recurring, you talk to all these women, hundreds of women, is there anything recurring you hear from all these women that sounds the same?
Always.
What is it?
There's a handful of like, I hear it from everybody. They are so exhausted and devastated by their hair loss. And they feel alone. So that's one thing that we always connect over. It's so funny. There's like these little experiences, like the restaurant question. There's a lot of these like little experiences that we all have in common. It's like, yeah, when you get sunburned on your scalp because your hair is so thin. So it's like, we always wear hats, or, how long it takes us to get ready when we're doing our hair because it's thin and we have to use all these products and all these techniques to try to make it look good. And then it goes flat in half an hour. It's like we share these really common experiences, and being able to share that with somebody, kind of I know it's not in person, but one-on-one is really validating. I think that's one thing that's really missing in the whole hair loss experience, is feeling validated, because so many of people want to just brush it aside. It's just hair. It's not that big of a deal. It'll probably come back. Try this cream, try this pill. And a lot of women feel very invalidated in how they feel. And so I think a lot of times that's more than anything what they're kind of looking for, is some validation that this sucks and it's hard and it's okay to feel that way. It's okay to be mad. It's okay to be mad that this is unfair, that this happened to you, And then on the other hand, just like needing that reassurance that it won't always feel that bad, and that there are solutions and things that can help you kind of work through that. So I think needing their feelings validated, even though they don't usually say that, that's the vibe I get from a lot of women. In fact, a lot of them try to downplay their hair loss and say, I know it's not that bad, or it's not as bad as a lot of women's. They'll say that a lot. And I'll say, hair loss is hair loss is hair loss. I'm not judging you on how little or how much hair you've lost, because it's hard. The process of losing hair, the experience of losing hair, that's what's hard. It's not the amount. And then they're always very like, oh, like, yeah, I needed to hear that. I think we're made to feel really vain when we mourn our hair loss, when we mourn the loss of our hair. And I don't see that vain at all. I see that as very normal. So those are some of the common things. And then of course, they're usually looking for a topper that is ultra realistic. That's what everybody says. I want it to look really natural. And it always makes me laugh, because they're like, what's the most natural looking topper? I'm like, there's a lot of factors. But really that connection, that one-on-one connection, I would say is the biggest thing I think women are looking for.
And you just lit up when you started talking about your community. Like, you just lit up. You might be getting a dose of helper's high. There's something in it that I'm so glad you do it, and I hope you continue doing it, because you've helped so many people. And you mentioned I want to mention a couple of things. You said, I'm looking for the most natural looking thing there is. And that, like you said, it's, I always stress with you, Lacie, I'm like, just, once you style it, it's going to look great. Out the box, out the bag, it's not going to look, that's no. One of my messages. I've even seen some of the heaviest, I've produced some of the heaviest in the past, biggest pieces that are like, whoa, super wiggy, but with someone with super duper skills at styling, they can pull it off,
Absolutely.
They can make it look good. Yeah. We like to make lighter things, whatever. We're not going into product, promise you that. but yeah, to look natural, it's just never going to look natural coming out of a box or a bag unless it's pre-styled and like pinned to a mannequin or something and sent. Yeah. So I just want to get that out there. We're going to close down shortly, but definitely there's, I'd love to hear your comments down below, and I'll definitely put some information out on Lacie. If you don't know of Lacie, you must know of Lacie, and I will definitely put her information so everyone can hear. A couple more things. I asked you the recurring things you hear from the hundreds of women. I've met with a few, and I've had the similar experiences. And one thing, I think I heard it recently, and it was for topper wearers and also wig wearers. I heard this, and it was like they were saying the same line. They didn't know each other, but I just want to be me.
Yeah.
It was that, or maybe I'm twiddling it, or I just want to look like me. I just want to be
Yeah.
me, or I just want to look like me. It was one of the
Mhm.
two. But I kept hearing this, and I was like, oh my god. So it's almost like this community are not looking for, I'm gonna wear a pink topper or a pink wig
Right.
today. I'm gonna look like Madonna tomorrow and share. I'm dating myself. Okay, I'm from the 80s.
I love Cher.
Yeah.
And
So
Madonna for that
yeah. So yeah, it's about, yeah, the thing in common, I think, with the community is I want to look like me. I had this color hair before. I want to have that color hair. So
Yeah.
that's that. I just wanted to bring that up. And just the last question for you is, if there were two or three, somebody who hadn't had the Lacie Rodriguez experience, doesn't know anything, they're just beginning on the hair loss journey, and they're afraid and, oh my god, overwhelmed, or what, inside or outside products, anything. Just if there's a one, two, or three tips you could give to that newcomer to hair, please could you share something?
Sure. Yeah. I always tell people to find community as soon as you possibly can. And a lot of women act like that seems childish. Like, I'm not in high school anymore. I don't need like a girl gang. And that's really not what it is at all. But it's just finding that support system of women who've been through the same thing. And I don't know, the magic of that is just incomparable. So finding these women and filling your social media feed with
Mm-hmm.
really amazing women who are living a really fulfilling life and also have hair loss. Some of them don't even wear alternative hair, and that's good to see too. You don't have to have alternative hair to live a happy life, but some of us choose to wear it. So I would say that is a huge part of kind of shifting your perspective, because a lot of us feel like when our hair is falling out that, like, the joy in life, that joy of going out and enjoying a night out is over, but it doesn't have to be. So I'd say finding community is first. The second thing is finding some kind of solution for you. And that can be a million different things. Could be like, shaving your head and just rocking like a bald look. There's some women, that's what they do, and they feel really empowered by that. And that's their choice of their solution, right? It doesn't have to be, of course, my solution is hair toppers and wigs. Like I love wearing hair when I want to feel put together. You could just really double down on working with a doctor, a dermatologist. If you feel like that's going to help you in this journey, do it. Finding something to focus on that's within your control. That doesn't mean your hair is going to magically grow back. You might, but it's usually just feeling like you're taking that power back, that I'm doing something about something that feels powerless. So finding some kind of solution for you to give you some of that power back. And then just doing that inner work. And sometimes that's therapy. Sometimes that's just self-care and, getting really, really familiar with how you function and what your real needs are. And the more you work on that, the better you're going to feel and the less you're going to care about losing your hair.
Love it. All right, you just pulled out another question. You said self-care. All right, well, this is definitely the last one, but
Sure.
so you gave us one before. Top, do you have a top 2 or 3 self-care acts that you do for yourself that make you feel full and loved and like awesome?
Yeah. The breaks, the solo trips, that's one of my number one things. I'm a kind of person that I need to be alone sometimes. That's how I recharge my battery. That's how I, get rid of the overwhelm in my life and feel like I feel confident in my ability to do the things I want to do. And that's taking alone time. So for me, that is like number one. Number two is getting enough sleep, because like I said, I know how much my sleep affects my anxiety foremost and my health in general. But being really good about getting enough sleep is really important to me. And I should say diet and exercise is really important, but that's still something I'm working on. But I know that when I do take care of my physical health, I always feel better mentally and emotionally. And then and everybody's different, but one of my favorite things to do is to do my hair and makeup. I don't know what it is. It's therapeutic. And especially when I'm having a really down day or I feel really anxious, I will just put on some of my favorite calming music. I love the Eagles, and that might sound like that's dating me, but they're like my favorite band, and I will listen to them while I silently put on my makeup and do my hair. And that always makes me feel also like, I don't know, it's just therapeutic for me. Journaling, meditation, I've gotten really into meditating. All of those things have really helped me feel like I'm doing the best I can to take care of myself so I can show up the way I want to in my life and for the people I love.
Amazing. So many takeaways. Lacie Rodriguez, thank you so much for joining us on the show. It's been so fun having you here, and we can't wait to learn and hear more about you.
Thank you so much, James. I really, really appreciate you inviting me here.
To get the show notes with all the resources discussed, go to dimpleshair.com and sign up for our newsletter. And don't forget to like and subscribe.